Hey y'all, it's Chrissy from Teadoddles, and it's time for another episode of Sew This. In today's episode, we're going to be talking all about bias tape. Now, I've done some tutorials about neck binding and things like that. You can find it in my playlists, my previous sewing tutorial playlists. I'll put links down below just so you can check that out. But today we're talking about what you might encounter if you have a pattern piece for bias tape, and how to figure bias tape if you want to use that in place of a pattern piece, or if you don't have a pattern piece. Okay, this is the pattern piece for this pattern that I'm currently working on. As you can see, it has a curved hem, right? So this is kind of akin to a skirt with a really curved bottom, right? Some skirts fall flatter and some have a really curved edge. So this is sort of like that on a small scale, all right? So for this pattern piece, they want me to cut 4 pieces, and it's a hem bias, okay? Which makes it much easier if you're doing a curved hem. I'm just going to say, having the bias tape, they don't necessarily call it bias tape. Well, if you buy it in the store, they call it bias tape. So I'm just going to call it bias tape. Having bias tape for the hem makes a curved hem much easier, because otherwise you have to do different things to make that hem come up and stay flat. So, which I will do, I will show you more about sewing the curved hems in my next episode. So, but for this, I want to talk about how to lay out a pattern piece like this right now. The grain line is always on a pattern piece. And I've talked about this before in other episodes. Let me get this to show right. And it has a little arrow, and you'll notice that it is diagonal to the parallel edges, okay? So grain line on your fabric is the weft and weave of the threads they use to make the fabric. So horizontal, vertical. This is my folded edge of this fabric. So this is a grain line, and what runs perpendicular to it in the opposite direction is also a grain line, okay? So that's what they want you to line that arrow up at, because they want this to be diagonal to the grain lines. So usually you can see little lines of the fabric or something to lay it out. You just need to get it as close as you can. This one's kind of easy to see because we got these little pieces, and I can really see my grain line. Now, the purpose of this is because your fabric gets stretchier. If you cut across, even though this is a stretchy fabric, or a knit fabric, so it already has stretch in both directions, when I cut this, it's going to be even stretchier, okay? And you can also do this with like 100% cotton or polyesters. Pretty much any fabric, you cut it on the bias, you're going to get stretchier fabric, okay? Now, they do sell bias tape in the store, and usually it's cotton or polyester. Occasionally you can find some jersey knit. That's not as common to see in the store. But if you are showing a knit fabric, you need a knit bias tape, okay? It's not going to give the same, even if you put it on the bias and it has more stretch. It's not going to stretch as much as the same fabric will stretch on the bias, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. So, and when you cut this, I like to pin these pieces. Now, a lot of times I will set objects on my pattern pieces or whatever, and I'll just use my rotary cutter. But when I'm dealing with bias cut, because it's such a thin strip, I always pin my pieces down to make sure that they stay as close to diagonal as they can possibly be. Now, if you didn't have a piece of bias, a pattern piece for bias, and you say you wanted to use bias tape for your curved edge, here's how you figure that. Hey y'all, just a little insert here. I'm about to use a lot of math terms, and I blame it on being in pre-calculus brain, so I just wanted to apologize for that. And all the math equations will be at the end of the video and in the description. All right, back to the show. All right, you would have to measure your curved edge, which you can do with a soft measuring tape. You just place it slowly around the curve and turn it as you go until you know how big your whole hem is, okay? And once you have that measurement, you want your bias tape to be slightly bigger than that measurement, plus whatever your hem is, like when you sew the two ends together. That's because this outer edge is going to be slightly longer than this inner edge, okay? Think about circles when you have concentric circles, okay? The outside circle has a bigger diameter than the inside circle. Works the same with bias tape. Now, and if you want it to lay flat, lay correctly, you have to do a little bit of math. So for an outside curve like this, once you measure your whole hem to see how much you need, you multiply that dimension times 15 to 20%, and you're going to take that number that you get and add it to your original dimension. I'm going to put some little, you'll see the math equation up here on the screen, and I'll put it down in the description box so you can have that for future reference. And once you get that dimension, you add in your hem, okay? So when you add in your hem, what you got to think about is that you have two ends coming together. So if you have a 1/2 inch hem, you got to add in 1/2 inch twice, because it's going to take 1/2 inch off of both ends, okay? So that is the equation for figuring out outside curve. For your neckline, that top edge is going to be a little bit smaller than the edge it's attached to. So you have to do slightly different calculation. You'll measure your whole opening, and then you will multiply that number times 80 to 85%. Okay? And then whatever that number is, then you'll add in your hem dimension so that your whole piece of bias binding is slightly less than this, because when you sew it and you flip it up, then it'll lay correctly across your neckline. And that is the way to get the best fit for it to lay correctly across your neck and not be poking up or standing up. I've made shirts myself where I was doing that because I did not follow that rule, which I know that rule, but that when I try to do things too fast, I just do stuff and don't pay attention to what I'm doing. So don't be like me. Do your math so that your piece will fit correctly. Now, I'll put all those math equations down in the box below so that they'll be there if you need to reference them. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and pin this down. I'm gonna show you how I cut it out. Okay, I've got everything pinned down, and now I'm going to cut this out with my rotary cutter. Oh, when I discovered rotary cutters back a long time ago when I started learning to sew, I never looked back. So if you don't have one of these for cutting out even apparel patterns, I suggest you get one, because it makes it's so much easier, even when you're going around curves and stuff. Sometimes I have to snip corners for curves and stuff. Not snip corners. I mean, when it gets a little inside corners and stuff, I have to use my scissors to get right in the point. But otherwise, this right here makes things go faster. And normally, I don't even pin anymore when it comes to these things. I just, like I said, I set things on top and go right over my mat. Even when I have pieces I have to move around sometimes. So now, I have, sticking to my mat. I need a new mat, y'all. Alright, so I have this little piece cut out, and I need 4 pieces. So I've cut out 2 because I had a double layer of fabric. So what I will do, so I don't have to keep moving this around, I'm going to lay this right on this edge. Make sure I'm getting my bias edge. And I'm not going to pin it to the fabric again. Usually I can do this pretty good because it's slightly heavier because of having the other fabric in it. And then I'll just cut out my piece. I just kind of hold it with my fingers. Because the reality is, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be about right. All right. All right. Now, I've got my 4 pieces cut out. And I just wanted to show you how different it makes the stretch. I'll just move those pieces to the side. But you can see the diagonal bits. All right. So, I take this piece. I'm going to lay it right here. Let's see how far it stretches. See, it stretches pretty good. See how much that stretches? And now if I compare that to, I want to get just 1 layer of this. The stretch, well, this one may stretch just as much. This one stretches pretty good. Either way. This way now, it doesn't stretch as much, which is typical. A lot of knit fabrics stretch more this way than they do the other way. So, but this right here stretches so much, and I don't have to pull on it as much. Now, while it does stretch more, and that makes it easier to put around the curve, you don't want to be like stretching it out as you sew, because then it sucks everything back in after you sew, and it makes the hem all crazy looking. So this is just to make it easier to get around the curve. See, as you can see, if I do this, it does much nicer than if you were to use the regular piece of fabric. And that's the purpose of it. It just makes it easier to get around the curve without the fabric doing funny things. So that is bias tape for knit fabrics, really. And I will do a video for bias tape for quilts at some point. It works a little differently, and honestly, when you bind quilts, you don't have to use bias tape, but you can. I'll do more about how to figure that up and how to actually make hem tape for quilts in a future episode. But next week's episode, like I said, I will show you how to actually pin this on and sew it to your garment. So hopefully y'all found that helpful, and if you have any questions about bias tape, please let me know in the comment section. I don't know where my brain was going on that. Yeah, there we go. Bias tape or hem tape. That's what you call it. Now there is something called hem tape, but it is not the same thing. It is, hold on a second. And like magic, I'm back. This is called hem tape. So I don't want you to confuse that with bias tape. Not the same thing. This is made entirely of polyester. It is on the straight grain, not the bias grain. It will not stretch. This is great for, well, it can be used on hems, but straight hems. That's what I'll say about that. You see this a lot. Let me think about this. Like if you have dress pants or something like that, and you put it across the thing, it just gives it a nicer finish. I've seen it on jackets on the lapels, like where the little vent is in the back of jackets and things like that. So this is not something you want to try to use for binding curved hems, because it's not going to work out too well for you. So I just want to clarify that. This is hem bias. So different thing. All right, so I'm gonna let y'all go. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. And remember to have a life lived creatively, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye.